Imagine this. You're standing at the threshold of everything you've ever wanted. The opportunity is there, open like a door, just waiting for you to step through. Maybe it's love, maybe it's success, maybe it's peace with yourself. For a moment, you can almost feel it. Your chest lifts, your breath sharpens, the future glows just a little brighter. And then, without warning, you pull back. You hesitate. You sabotage it. You say the wrong thing, delay the decision, convince yourself you're not ready, or create chaos where clarity should be. The door slowly closes, and you tell yourself it was never meant for you in the first place. Why do we do this? Why do we, with trembling hands, destroy the very bridges that could lead us to freedom? There is a strange paradox at play here. Human beings crave happiness, yet often recoil when it approaches. We long for love, but distrust it when it arrives. We want success, but we scatter distractions in our path the moment we get close. We say we want to grow, and yet we cling to the very habits, relationships, and thoughts that suffocate us. It's as though a secret part of us worships the cage more than the freedom beyond its bars. What if the enemy you keep fighting isn't outside of you at all, but something woven into your very sense of self? What if the voice that whispers, "Don't try, don't trust, don't reach too high," is not an intruder, but a shadow you've carried for years, so familiar you mistake it for truth? You've felt it before, haven't you? That subtle pullback into the dark, the invisible tether that snaps you to the ground just when you thought you could finally fly. It's not always loud, not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like procrastination, sometimes perfectionism, sometimes the quiet, constant refrain, "I'm not enough." But here's the disturbing question. If you are not enough, by whose standards? Who planted that seed, and why do you water it daily with your own fear? Self-sabotage isn't just a bad habit. It isn't mere laziness, weakness, or lack of willpower. It is an existential wound, a philosophical puzzle wrapped in psychological scars. At its core, it's a contradiction, wanting life but fearing what life demands of you, longing for connection but suspecting that love itself is a trap. And yet, maybe self-sabotage is not the enemy we think it is. Perhaps it hides something deeper, an ancient defense mechanism, a distorted guardian trying to protect us from pain we no longer need to fear. If that's true, then sabotaging ourselves isn't just madness. It's logic twisted by history, by memory, by trauma. So the great question, are you failing because you are weak, or because a hidden part of you believes survival depends on it? The answer isn't simple. To uncover it, we must go deeper, peeling back the layers of psychology, philosophy, and the hidden machinery of the human mind. Only then can we confront the roots of this paradox, why we destroy what we most desire. And so the door reappears before you, glowing faintly in the distance. Will you open it this time? Or turn away once more? To understand that choice, we have to uncover the hidden roots of self-sabotage. If you peel back the layers of self-sabotage, you begin to see that it is not simply an act of weakness, but the residue of something older, something rooted in both psychology and philosophy. At its heart lies a strange inheritance, the stories you absorbed as a child, the patterns of thought carved into your nervous system, and the cultural myths you were born into without choice. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the essence of self-sabotage. It feels like fate, bad luck, missed opportunities, doomed relationships. But in truth, it is the unconscious mind pulling the strings from behind the curtain. We repeat the same cycles not because we enjoy suffering, but because the mind is addicted to the familiar. Consider this. A child grows up in an environment where love is conditional, where affection is withdrawn at the slightest failure, where trust is dangerous. That child learns not that love is nourishment, but that love is a gamble. As an adult, every time intimacy approaches, they retreat, not out of malice, but out of survival. The nervous system screams, "This is unsafe," and so they sabotage. Nietzsche would argue that beneath this lies the will to power, the instinct to assert control over one's reality, even if that means sabotaging it. To fail on your own terms feels safer than to succeed and risk it all being torn away. Better to burn the bridge yourself than to watch someone else do it when you're already halfway across. Self-sabotage in this light is not cowardice, but control in disguise. But there is another layer. Schopenhauer, that prophet of pessimism, believed that human desire itself is a form of suffering, that to want is to ache. Self-sabotage can then be seen as a rebellion against desire itself, a subconscious refusal to keep participating in the endless cycle of longing and disappointment. If I ruin it before it begins, the mind whispers, then I cannot be broken by its loss. Viktor Frankl, on the other hand, offered a radically different perspective. Suffering becomes bearable, even meaningful, when we discover purpose in it. Perhaps self-sabotage persists because it gives us an inverted sense of meaning. The struggle, the repetition, the familiar pain, at least it feels like something we know, something we can identify with. The chaos becomes an identity, and to let go of it would be to step into terrifying uncertainty. Who are you if you are not the one who ruins things? Psychology echoes these philosophical shadows. Cognitive distortions like all-or-nothing thinking, catastrophizing, or discounting the positive feed the soil of self-sabotage. Neuroscience adds another layer. The brain is wired for survival, not happiness. The amygdala, the ancient sentinel of fear, floods us with alarms whenever we step into unfamiliar territory. Success, intimacy, vulnerability, all of these can trigger the body to react as though a predator were near. And so we find ourselves trapped in a paradoxical feedback loop. We long for growth, yet our very biology and memory resist it. Every time we get close to change, old neural pathways light up, reminding us of the dangers of hope. This is why you may procrastinate on projects that could transform your life, why you may sabotage relationships that could nourish you, why you may dull your own brilliance. It is not irrational, it is over-rational. Logic built on outdated data. Pain masquerading as wisdom. Aldous Huxley once observed that experience is not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. Self-sabotage is what happens when unprocessed experience ossifies into self-protection. It is the ghost of past wounds replaying themselves endlessly in the present, masquerading as destiny. But here lies the problem. If the roots of sabotage are buried in the unconscious, then how do you fight what you cannot see? How do you untangle threads that were woven into your being before you even knew how to name them? The answer is not yet clear. What is clear is this. Every act of self-sabotage is not random, but symbolic, a symptom pointing towards something deeper. The broken mirror is not the problem. It is the reflection of the wound beneath. And so the tension builds. You begin to realize that what you call failure might not be failure at all, but a survival strategy that has outlived its purpose. But strategies, once ingrained, are not easily abandoned. To move forward, you must first confront the unseen weight of consequence. Because if sabotage is allowed to run unchecked, it does more than trip you in the present. It rewrites the very architecture of your future.
The most dangerous thing about self-sabotage is not the obvious failures, the missed deadline, the ruined relationship, the abandoned dream. Those wounds sting, but they are visible. The true damage lies in the unseen, the quiet erosion of your identity, the way sabotage rewires how you see yourself, others, and the very meaning of life. Think of it like water dripping onto stone. A single drop is harmless, but over years it carves deep grooves. Every time you betray your own potential, even in the smallest way, you leave an impression on your psyche. I cannot be trusted. I am the kind of person who ruins things. I am destined to fall short. The more often you repeat this cycle, the deeper the groove. until your mind no longer questions it. It becomes not just something you do, but something you are. This is where the trap tightens. Cognitive psychology shows us that the brain is a master of confirmation bias. Once you believe you are a saboteur, you begin to filter every experience through that lens. Failures confirm the story. Successes are dismissed as accidents. Love is interpreted as temporary, fragile, doomed to collapse. Over time, you don't just sabotage opportunities, you sabotage the very possibility of seeing yourself differently. And here the consequences ripple outward. If you believe you cannot sustain happiness, you will avoid it. If you believe you are unworthy of love, you will unconsciously seek relationships that prove you right. If you believe success always crumbles, you will align yourself with choices that guarantee the collapse. Trauma turns the world into a mirror, reflecting back the beliefs you carry, no matter how distorted. The social consequences are equally devastating. Self-sabotage has a way of isolating you, not always physically, but existentially. Friends may see you withdrawing. Partners may feel the distance you create. Colleagues may notice your hesitation, but they cannot see the invisible battle raging inside. And so you appear inconsistent, unreliable, difficult to understand. Slowly, people pull away, not because they don't care, but because they cannot fight the shadow that only you can confront. Worst still, self-sabotage often disguises itself as virtue. Procrastination dresses up as waiting for the perfect time. Perfectionism poses as high standards. Avoidance pretends to be independence. But beneath these masks lies fear, the fear of being exposed, of failing openly, of having your deepest insecurities confirmed. The result? You stay locked in a limbo between who you are and who you could be, always rehearsing the future, but never fully living it. Neurology deepens the picture. Each time you avoid risk or collapse into old patterns, the brain reinforces those neural pathways, strengthening the cycle. Self-sabotage, then, is not merely psychological, but biological. Your brain literally sculpts itself around avoidance. And with enough repetition, sabotage doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It feels like destiny. But the most haunting consequence is existential. Every time you sabotage yourself, you chip away at your own freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, that we are responsible for shaping our lives through choices. But what happens when you consistently choose against yourself? When you use your freedom not to expand, but to retreat? Freedom curdles into paralysis. Possibility collapses into inevitability. You become both prisoner and warden, chained by a script you didn't write, but continue to perform. And yet perhaps the cruelest irony is this: self-sabotage often works. It protects you from the sting of rejection, from the pain of failure, from the vulnerability of being truly seen. But the protection is hollow. It keeps you safe in the same way a locked cell keeps a prisoner safe from the storm outside. Yes, the walls shield you, but they also keep you from the sky. So the question sharpens. If self-sabotage shapes your identity, your relationships, your freedom, and even your biology, then who are you becoming by letting it rule you? What future are you writing in the ink of avoidance and fear? The consequences are already here, in the quiet compromises, the unfinished dreams, the love you push away before it can bloom. But here is the secret most never realize. The same force that sabotages you can also awaken you. The cracks it leaves in your life are not just scars, they are openings. And it is through these openings that the possibility of rebellion begins.
Every prison has a door, though not every prisoner believes it. The same is true with self-sabotage. The walls feel permanent, the cycles feel inevitable. But rebellion begins the moment you recognize this. Sabotage is not your identity. It is a strategy. And strategies can be unlearned, rewired, replaced. But breaking free requires something more radical than surface-level motivation. It demands a shift in perspective so deep it shakes the foundation of how you see yourself. The first step is paradoxical. Instead of fighting your sabotage, you must listen to it. Ask yourself, what is my sabotage trying to protect me from? Beneath every destructive pattern lies a twisted form of care. Procrastination protects you from the terror of inadequacy. Perfectionism shields you from criticism. Avoidance saves you from the risk of intimacy. These are not enemies, but outdated guardians, like watchmen who never realized the war has ended. Jung would call them shadows, parts of yourself you've repressed, but which continue to act out in secret. To rebel is not to kill the shadow, but to integrate it. Imagine telling that inner saboteur, I see you. I know you're trying to keep me safe, but I no longer need safety at the price of my freedom. This simple act of acknowledgement transforms sabotage from an unconscious puppet master into a conscious signal. Each time you notice the urge to retreat, you can pause, breathe, and ask, what fear is surfacing right now? Awareness turns the invisible into the visible, and once you can see it, you can choose differently. The second step is to embrace vulnerability as strength, not weakness. Sartre argued that freedom is terrifying because it places the burden of responsibility entirely on us. But freedom is also possibility, an open sky instead of a locked room. To break free from sabotage, you must be willing to risk falling. You must allow yourself to fail visibly, to love without guarantees, to succeed without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Vulnerability is not the enemy of safety. It is the birthplace of authentic living. History offers countless examples. Consider the artists who risked ridicule to create what had never been seen before, the leaders who stood in uncertainty for the sake of a vision, the everyday people who walked away from the cages of familiar pain to step into the unknown. Their rebellion was not against the world, but against their inner saboteur. They chose presence over paralysis. Philosophy and psychology converge here. The antidote to sabotage is not perfection, but meaning. Viktor Frankl survived the unspeakable horrors of concentration camps by discovering that even in suffering, life offers purpose. Likewise, you break free not by erasing fear, but by anchoring yourself to something greater than fear. Ask yourself, what is worth failing for? What is worth suffering for? When you find a purpose bigger than your sabotage, its power begins to dissolve. Practically, this rebellion requires small, deliberate acts of defiance against your old patterns. When you feel the urge to procrastinate, take one small step forward anyway. When you want to withdraw from intimacy, speak one vulnerable truth instead. When you're tempted to burn down your progress, pause and breathe into the discomfort rather than acting on it. Each act is a declaration, I am not my past pattern. I am capable of choosing differently. And yes, the brain itself can be rewired. Neuroplasticity shows us that repeated choices carve new pathways, that each time you resist sabotage, you strengthen the architecture of freedom. Over time, what once felt impossible begins to feel natural. The grooves of failure can be replaced with grooves of resilience. But rebellion is not a single battle. It is a way of living. There will be moments when you relapse, when sabotage lures you back into its arms. Do not mistake these for defeat. Every revolution stumbles. What matters is that you return to the fight again and again until the very act of rebelling becomes your new normal. So, how do you break free? You rebel by turning the shadow into a teacher, by embracing vulnerability, by grounding yourself in meaning, and by practicing small acts of courage until they reshape your life. And yes, the brain itself can be rewired. Neuroplasticity shows us that repeated choices carve new pathways, that each time you resist sabotage, you strengthen the architecture of freedom. Over time, what once felt impossible begins to feel natural. The grooves of failure can be replaced with grooves of resilience. But rebellion is not a single battle. It is a way of living. There will be moments when you relapse, when sabotage lures you back into its arms. Do not mistake these for defeat. Every revolution stumbles. What matters is that you return to the fight again and again until the very act of rebelling becomes your new normal. So, how do you break free? You rebel by turning the shadow into a teacher, by embracing vulnerability, by grounding yourself in meaning, and by practicing small acts of courage until they reshape your life. But what happens when you finally stop fighting yourself altogether? What lies on the other side of this long struggle? The truth that renders sabotage unnecessary. For that, we must look into the deepest realization of all.
Imagine, for a moment, that every wound, every self-betrayal, every act of sabotage you've ever committed was not a mistake, but a message. Imagine that the very things you hated in yourself, the procrastination, the perfectionism, the hesitation, were not chains, but clues. What would it mean if your sabotage had always been pointing you toward the truth you were not yet ready to see? Here is the final revelation. Self-sabotage is not your enemy. It is your mirror. The reason it feels so personal, so intimate, is because it is born from the deepest part of you, the part that longs to survive, even if it must distort reality to protect you. The paradox is this: what once kept you alive is now keeping you from living. The same patterns that shielded you in childhood become prisons in adulthood. The same fear that once saved you from abandonment now prevents you from love. The same doubt that kept you cautious now suffocates your potential. And yet, when you stop seeing sabotage as a monster to be slain and start seeing it as a teacher, everything shifts. The mirror no longer reflects only brokenness, it reflects your resilience, your creativity, your desperate longing for wholeness. You realize you were never weak. You were adapting. You were surviving the only way you knew how. This is the ultimate truth. Self-sabotage is not the destruction of self, but the self's misguided attempt at preservation. It is your shadow's way of loving you. And when you see it this way, the war inside quiets. You no longer waste energy fighting yourself. Instead, you begin to integrate. You begin to thank the parts of you that once sabotaged love, success, joy, for they were protecting a younger you, a wounded you, a version of yourself who believed survival required shrinking, hiding, retreating. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of integrating all aspects of the self, including the shadow. This is where sabotage transforms. By accepting it, you free it. By freeing it, you free yourself. Think of the irony. You spent years believing you were your own worst enemy, and then you discover you were your own most loyal ally, albeit one who learned the wrong lessons. The rebellion ends not in annihilation, but in reconciliation. From this place, the future looks different. You stop asking, how do I stop ruining everything, and start asking, how do I live fully, knowing all parts of me are welcome? You stop fearing the moments when fear returns, because you see them for what they are, echoes, not destiny. And this leads to the final paradox. The moment you accept sabotage as part of your story, it loses its power to define your future. Yes,
you will stumble. Yes, the urge to retreat will whisper again. But now, instead of obeying blindly, you will pause, reflect, and choose. You will not always choose perfectly, but you will choose consciously. And that alone transforms everything. The cinematic image is this: the door you feared for so long stands before you once more. You realize it was never locked. You realize the shadow standing beside you was not guarding it to keep you out, but waiting for you to be strong enough to walk through. And when you step forward, hesitant, trembling, but awake, you discover the greatest liberation. Sabotage was never about destroying your life. It was about preparing you to claim it. So now the question returns, but in a different form. Not, why do I sabotage myself, but what will I create now that I no longer need to? The choice is yours. Always was, always will be. Walk through the door.